As promised, we move to part 3 of the lectures. And as you can see, this is only slide 25 of 40 slides. And I don't want to hasten it because I just said there will be 3. If the fourth one is necessary, I will do that one also. So far, we've looked into the exploration of the human person as the meeting point of psychology and spirituality by tracing psychology's gradual rediscovery of the spiritual dimension of human existence, beginning with Freud's critique of religion and progressing through Jung, Maslow, Frankl, and Pargament. We've looked at how modern psychology has increasingly recognized meaning, self-transcendence, religious coping, and spirituality as legitimate dimensions of human flourishing. This historical development will provide the foundation for understanding why Catholic education insists upon the integral formation of the human person rather than the mere transmission of human knowledge. Now we will move to that integrated vision where we ended up a while ago. So after everything we have discussed, we can now state the central thesis as we move forward. Psychology and spirituality are not competing disciplines. They are complementary ways of understanding the same human person. Psychology explains how we think, feel, develop, and behave. Theology and spirituality reveal why we exist and toward whom our lives are ultimately directed. The meeting point of both disciplines is not an abstract theory, but the concrete human person. Yung talagang tao. Who develops psychologically while responding to God's invitation to grace and communion. This integrated vision will actually serve as the foundation for the rest of the course. So, complementarity is what we will push forward. But as we push for complementarity, we need to be reminded that integration requires respecting the proper limits of each discipline. Psychology can investigate religious experiences, measure the effects of prayer, and study spiritual practices using scientific methods. However, it cannot determine whether God truly acts within those experiences. That question belongs to theology. Conversely, theology should not ignore psychological knowledge. Those engaged in ministry, counseling, or spiritual direction benefit greatly from understanding human development, trauma, personality, and even mental health. So, respecting these boundaries allows psychology and theology to collaborate without actually confusing their methods. So, as one who's actually trained in theology and accompaniment and spiritual direction, I know the limits of my profession. I will not do psychological diagnoses precisely because while I understand how it works, the limits of my discipline does not allow me. So, simpleng respeto sa disiplina. Yun yung puntong nais kong sabihin. Grace works through nature. So, napansin nyo siguro, biglang bumibilis yung pag-usap kasi nalatag ko na yung mga pundasyon na kailangan para mapalalim yung mga ideya na nandito sa inyong harapan. Kaya pwede nang bumilis ng konti yung pagtalakay. Just the remaining 13 slides, so that's gonna be very fast. So, one of the oldest principles in Catholic theology is that grace builds upon nature. God ordinarily works through our humanity rather than bypassing it. Healthy psychological development often creates a stronger psychological, stronger foundation for spiritual growth. Laging ganun yung nangyayari, no? Nakakatulong para sa pagtubo, okay? While unresolved emotional wounds can actually affect how people understands themselves, others, and even God. And that too, we have to pay attention to, right? Therefore, authentic spiritual formation must care for the whole person. Psychological healing and spiritual growth are not separate journeys, therefore, but is something that we need to understand together, no? Hindi inuunawa ng hiwalay, no? That's why even Pope Francis in Veritatis Gaudium would say what is needed is a hermeneutical principle, no? It's a hermeneutics is the theory of interpretation. We need a way of interpreting how we understand reality from the standpoint of the gospel. So, and these are not separate journeys, as we've said, but corroborative ones. No? Corroborative ones. That's why we need to summarize the relationship between psychology and spirituality this way, no? In one very memorable distinction, psychology would ask how people grow, and therefore it will study the processes, the stages, and the conditions that shape development. Spirituality will ask towards whom people grow, and this will reveal humanity's ultimate vocation and destiny in communion with God. Psychology will explain the journey, while spirituality will explain the destination. Both are necessary if we are to understand the whole person. And this is where we see something happening, right? Uh, we need to have an integrated vision. So we gathered together the major ideas we have developed throughout week 1 so far. The integration of psychology and spirituality rests on several key principles. One, the dignity of every human person. Two, the complementarity of faith and reason. Fides et ratio. The importance of self-transcendence. The value of integral formation. And the dialogue between empirical science and theology. These principles will guide every topic that we will use for the succeeding sections of the course. And something we have to pay attention to. So these are non-negotiable. That's what I'm saying. No, the consideration of one truth, the shared object of understanding, human person, different perspectives, grace and nature, the inexhaustible mystery, and integral formation. Let's look at the last 10 slides a little bit more slowly, but hopefully with more sense, nevertheless. So, having discussed the dialogue between psychology and spirituality, we now move or we now broaden our perspective a bit. This conversation is actually part of something much larger, the Catholic understanding of the relationship between faith and reason, fides et ratio. Throughout history, people have often assumed that science and religion are enemies. One supposedly belong to evidence and reason, while the other belongs only to faith. The Catholic intellectual tradition rejects this false opposition. St. John Paul II captures this beautifully in the opening sentence of Fides et Ratio. Faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. Notice the image that he uses. A bird cannot fly with only one wing. Similarly, the same is true with human reason. We're basically saying, actually, that's also impossible in human reason. Human search for truth becomes incomplete when it relies exclusively on reason, or better yet, when it relies exclusively also on faith alone. Reason investigates the created world. As such, it asks questions like, how does the brain work? Uh, what causes depression? How does personality develop? What helps people recover from trauma? These are legitimate scientific questions. Faith asks another set of questions. Why are we here? What gives suffering meaning? What is the purpose of freedom? Who is the human person before God? These questions cannot be answered simply by laboratory experiments or even statistical analyses. This does not mean that faith ignores reason, nor that reason rejects faith. Instead, each contributes something the other cannot fully provide. The Catholic tradition therefore insists that all genuine truth comes from the same source, God Himself. And if this is true, then authentic scientific discovery cannot ultimately contradict authentic revelation. Apparent conflicts usually arise because either science has not yet reached adequate conclusions or theology has misunderstood revelation. This principle is especially important for our course. Psychology is not something the church merely tolerates. Rather, psychology becomes an important conversation partner because it helps us understand God's greatest visible creation, the human person. As future researchers, educators, counselors, or SDs, or spiritual directors, we should therefore never fear scientific inquiry. At the same time, we should recognize that scientific explanation alone never exhausts the mystery of humanity. Psychology tells us many things about the person. Faith tells us who that person ultimately is. Together, they allow us to contemplate the fullness of truth. The fullness of truth. This leads us to implications of what we are saying to spiritual direction and pastoral ministry. Everything we have discussed until now has practical consequences. This is not simply a theoretical course. It changes how we accompany people, how we address people. We identify three groups: spiritual directors, pastoral ministers, and educators. Each requires both psychological understanding and spiritual wisdom. Let's begin with SDs. Many people seek spiritual direction because they want to deepen their relationship with God. Yet every difficulty that appears spiritual, yet not every difficulty that is spiritual is purely spiritual. A person may struggle to pray because of unresolved grief. Another may experience overwhelming guilt because of scrupulosity, an idea that you will see in tomorrow's videos. Someone else may constantly fear God's rejection because of childhood attachment wounds. Without psychological knowledge, the spiritual director might mistakenly interpret these realities as weak faith or lack of commitment. Psychology, therefore, becomes an instrument of discernment. It helps distinguish what belongs primarily to emotional development, personality, trauma, or mental health from what belongs to the person's spiritual journey. Now consider pastoral ministers. Priests, religious, and lay ministers encounter people at moments of crisis, illness, bereavement, addiction, anxiety, depression, maritime conflict, and vocational uncertainty. Pastoral care cannot simply quote scripture while ignoring severe depression, nor should it immediately medicalize every spiritual struggle. Good ministry knows that when to accompany spiritually and when to encourage professional psychological help, and when both forms of care are needed simultaneously. Finally, educators. Catholic education aims not merely to produce knowledgeable graduates, but mature human persons. Teachers, therefore, educate more than the intellect. They cultivate character, they foster resilience, they encourage empathy, and they help students discover purpose. This requires understanding both psychological development and spiritual formation. The implication is simple. Accompanying persons well requires seeing them whole. Psychology teaches us how people develop. Spirituality reminds us towards whom they are developing. Both are necessary if we truly wish to serve the human person. But we also need to be careful about the dangers of reductionism. Having argued for integration, we must also identify two dangers that constantly threaten it. The first is psychological reductionism. This occurs whenever every religious experience is explained entirely in psychological terms. Prayer becomes nothing more than relaxation. Conversion becomes emotional catharsis. Religious community becomes merely social belonging. Hope becomes optimism. Forgiveness becomes emotional release. While psychological factors are certainly present, something essential is lost. The transcendent dimension disappears. The opposite danger is spiritual reductionism. This occurs when every human problem is interpreted only as a spiritual issue. Depression becomes weak, anxiety becomes lack of trust in God, trauma becomes insufficient prayer, addiction becomes merely a moral failure. Such interpretations can seriously harm vulnerable persons because they ignore genuinely psychological realities. Notice that both forms of reductionism simplify the human person. One removes God, the other ignores human psychology. Both fail because the human person is more complex than either explanation alone. Catholic anthropology offers another path. The person is simultaneously biological, psychological, social, moral, and spiritual. These dimensions continually influence one another. That is why authentic accompaniment requires interdisciplinary wisdom. Whenever we reduce persons to only one dimension, we inevitably fail to understand them fully. To make sense of this, let's look at a more concrete example. And we see that in the cor inquietum. That's how it's called in Latin, cor inquietum, the restless heart. We now return to one of the greatest thinkers we've mentioned in Christian history, Saint Augustine. His famous opening words from the Confessiones or the Confessions summarize not only Christian spirituality, but in many ways, the entire course. You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. At first glance, this appears to be a purely theological statement. But notice how profoundly psychological it is. Every human being experiences restlessness. We constantly seek something more. We pursue success, relationships, recognition, wealth, achievement, or pleasure, believing that the next accomplishment will finally satisfy us. Yet, after every achievement, another desire emerges. Augustine asks, why? His answer is that this restlessness is not a defect. It is not a pathology. It is part of being human. The human heart was created for an infinite good. Finite things can satisfy us temporarily, but they cannot satisfy us completely. Psychology often describes this phenomenon as the search for meaning, identity, attachment, or fulfillment. Augustine interprets the same experience theologically. The longing itself points beyond the world toward God. This does not invalidate psychology. Rather, it gives psychology a larger horizon. Psychology observes the restlessness. Augustine explains its deepest origin. The two perspectives, therefore, complement one another beautifully. Every authentic search for meaning, truth, goodness, and beauty ultimately reflects the person's openness to transcendence. And this is where we actually see the dialogue between the two. So let's pause and look back over everything we have accomplished in the series of week 1 lectures. We began by asking a simple question: who is the human person? From there, we discovered that psychology and spirituality approach the same person from different perspectives. Psychology studies cognition, emotional behavior, development, personality, relationships, trauma, and resilience. Spirituality, on the other hand, studies meaning, transcendence, vocation, grace, hope, and communion with God. When we then explored Christian anthropology, recognizing that every person possesses inherently through Freud, Jung, Maslow, Frankl, and Pargament. Finally, we saw that Catholic education seeks the integral formation of the whole person. Taken together, these discussions lead to one central conclusion. Neither psychology nor spirituality alone adequately explains the human person. Only through dialogue can they offer a fuller understanding of who we are. And this integrated perspective will become the foundation for everything that follows in the course. But I should not leave you hanging. We now move to consider the key thinkers we will engage. No? We will see them again as we move forward. But here we start summarizing already, little by little, what the course is about, and how do we engage these developments. So we've looked at the key thinkers again, the key magisterial documents, and let's look at so far with what we have established, no? And here we're looking at, so week 1 has established the foundational framework for the entire course. We have traced the convergence of psychology and spirituality in their shared concern for the human person. We have examined uh, how each approaches this mystery through different but complementary methods and grounded our inquiry in the Catholic vision of Humano Dei. Remember, as we conclude week 1, let's return to the question with which we began. Who is the human person? Everything we have discussed has been directed toward answering that question. There are 3 major conclusions that have helped us so far. First, psychology and spirituality are complementary. They are not competing explanations of reality. Psychology, we've said, studies the human person through observations, experience, and scientific investigation. Spirituality studies the same person through the lens of revelation, grace, and humanity's relationship with God. They address different dimensions of the same reality and therefore enrich rather than threaten one another. Second, the human person is their shared object. Throughout this lecture, we have seen that the person cannot be reduced to biology, to psychology, sociology, embodied, relational, free, and is therefore called to holiness. Just a minute. It's saying something else. No. Called to holiness. The human person, therefore, is richer than any single discipline can fully explain. Third, integration serves formation. Bringing psychology and spirituality together is not simply an academic exercise. It has practical consequences for education, counseling, spiritual direction, pastoral ministry, and research. If we truly wish to accompany people responsibly, we must understand both their psychological development and their spiritual vocation. These 3 foundations summarize what we've been talking about the past week. They will remain the foundation upon which everything succeeding lecture is gonna be built. Let's look at looking ahead. Having established the foundation, we are now ready to move forward. The central question for week 2 is a fascinating one. Does faith itself develop? We know that people develop physically, emotionally, cognitively, and morally. But does spiritual maturity also unfold in recognizable stages? If so, what can psychology tell us? And where must theology go beyond psychology? To answer these questions, we will study several influential developmental theorists. And as educators talking about HAU, this is important. We will begin with Erik Erikson, whose psychosocial theory explains how identity develops across the lifespan. You know, this one, James Fowler, for example, is one of the theories I've studied very closely. And I started studying him in 1998. And until now, there's still a lot to discover about him. Next, we will study Jean Piaget, whose work on cognitive development helps explain how people's capacity for abstract thinking changes with age. We will then study Lawrence Kohlberg, whose stages of moral reasoning reveal how our understanding of right and wrong matures. These psychological theories will prepare us for James Fowler, who proposed one of the most influential theories on the stages of faith development. In fact, in all honesty, I'd say Fowler, I've studied more than 4 semesters even. That's how important James Fowler is. Uh, I'm not sure I will give justice to his stages, but maybe I'll just pre-record some of the stages as we move forward. But because the entire book is very short but very interesting. It's just a single book, in fact. We will also examine Robert Keegan, whose constructive developmental theory explains how people make meaning throughout life, and Sharon Dallas Parks, whose work focuses on faith development during young adulthood. Notice, however, that week 2 raises an important theological question. Even if psychological development does the stages, does the action of God's grace follow exactly the same pattern? Can the Holy Spirit transcend developmental limitations? Can grace work in ways that psychology alone cannot predict? These questions remind us that psychology and theology remain distinct disciplines, even as they continue to illuminate one another, and therefore something we will have to pay attention to. So these are the texts we have used so far. Again, these are coming from 3 of the complementary areas: the theological sources, the psychological sources, and the spirituality studies. So I encourage you not simply to cite these authors, but to read them carefully. One of the goals of doctoral study is to engage primary text directly. That throughout this course, we will return to these sources because they provide the intellectual foundation for our discussions. No? Please check them out. Let me end with this slide. Gaudium de Veritate. We conclude precisely where every Catholic university ultimately begins, with the joy of truth. John Paul II describes the university as animated by the Gaudium de Veritate, the joy of searching for, discovering, and even communicating truth. This phrase beautifully captures what the entire course is as I envisioned it. The search for truth is never the possession of a single discipline. Psychology contributes indispensable knowledge about human development, personality, emotion, cognition, trauma, and healing. Spirituality reveals humanity's deepest identity, created by love, wounded by sin, redeemed by grace, and called to eternal communion with God. These are not opposing stories. They are different perspectives on the same human mystery. Our task is not to choose between psychology and spirituality or philosophy, but to allow them to enter into genuine dialogue. When psychology helps us understand the processes of human life, and spirituality reveals its ultimate meaning, we begin to see the human person more completely. As we move into the coming weeks, keep this image before you. The pursuit of truth is not merely an academic requirement, it is a vocation. And every lecture, every reading, every discussion, every movie, or every research project is an invitation to participate in that gaudium de veritate, the joy of seeking, the joy of discovering, and the joy of communicating the truth about the human person before God. And it is here where we basically end week 1 of our discussion. So the first part of the course, so this is technically the third of 3 parts. And we first present, and here we will try to look at the comprehensive synthesis of the relationship between psychology and spirituality by demonstrating the practical implications of this dialogue for education, pastoral ministry, counseling, and spiritual formation. The central argument is that psychology and spirituality are not competing explanations of human persons, but complementary disciplines that illuminate different dimensions of the same reality. I think that's quite clear. Psychology explains how human beings think, develop, behave, and relate to others, while spirituality and theology reveal humanity's ultimate vocation, purpose, and relationship with God. Their meeting point is always the human person, whose psychological development and spiritual growth occurs simultaneously. This integration requires respecting the proper limits of each discipline. Psychology, as an empirical science, can investigate religious behavior, spiritual practices, and psychological effects of faith, but it cannot determine the truth of divine revelation or the reality of God's action. Theology, on the other hand, interprets revelation and humanity's supernatural vocation, but benefits greatly from psychological insights into human development, personality, trauma, attachment, and emotional life. Authentic dialogue, therefore, depends not on confusing the methods of psychology and theology, but on recognizing their distinct yet complementary contribution to understanding human person. The lecture further develops this integration through the classical theological principle that grace builds upon nature. God's grace ordinarily works through the structures of human nature rather than bypassing them. So a healthy emotional development, a secure relationship, a psychological maturity provides fertile ground for spiritual growth, while unresolved psychological wounds can help shape one's experience of self, others, and God. Consequently, authentic Christian formation must address psychological healing and spiritual conversion, recognizing that these dimensions frequently influence one another. A simple but profound distinction basically says psychology asks how human beings grow, while spirituality asks grow towards whom. The Catholic synthesis of faith and reason will basically clarify these more and more. So, aside from that, we've also warned you against psychological of any forms of reductionism before we actually went back again to St. Augustine. And finally, by reviewing the principal themes that we have established so far. So, taken together, Part 3 completes the foundational framework of the course. This affirms that the search for truth requires both scientific inquiry and theological reflection, that authentic human formation must attend to the whole person, and that psychology and spirituality, when placed in genuine dialogue, provides a richer, more faithful, and more humane understanding of what it means to be a person created in the image of God and called to communion with Him. Thank you very much for bearing on this three parts lecture on the human person, and see you in our week 2 discussions. Good day, everyone.